Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men. Power Black men. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor. And joining me tonight is Ed Madison. Ed is a seasoned media professional with a 30-year track record as an executive producer, director, entrepreneur, and innovative educator. He has produced and directed programs and segments worldwide for network, syndicated, and cable television. He holds a PhD in communication from the School of Journalism and Communication at the University of Oregon. So without further ado, let's welcome Ed to the show. Hello, Ed. How are you?
I'm just doing great. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me.
All right. So before we dive into your work, let's start off with a few icebreakers. So first of all, tell us where you're from.
I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and all the history that comes with that, we didn't speak of until most of the rest of the country learned about just the tragedies that occurred there with the race massacre. But that's a whole nother topic. But yes, I was born in Tulsa.
Oklahoma. So name a woman who's inspired you to be who you are.
My mom. My mom was a fourth and fifth grade teacher, and my biggest fan.
And what's her name?
Devetta
Okay.
Cooksey Madison. She's no longer with us, but she, she was, driving down the road. It was 7 times 8, like the multiplication tables and everything else. And also, if she knew what I was supposed to be getting in school, and if she thought I wasn't getting it, she would hold court. She would take me by the arm and she'd walk into and she's like, oh my God, here she comes again, And while it was embarrassing for me at that point in life, I certainly appreciate her vigilance and just really instilling, both my parents, instilling in me the values that I have and appreciate today.
Sure. So with that being said, name a man you look up to and admire.
My father. So I carry my father and my grandfather's name. So I'm actually legally Eddie Lawrence Madison III. My dad was the first African-American hired into management at the Chicago Tribune in 1961. So he marched with Dr. King, covered the civil rights movement, and was my mentor and role model for much of my career.
Wow. So, we hear stories of people say, when you're a kid, teachers come up to you and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? So let's imagine that I'm your 5th grade teacher and I go, Ed, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you have told me?
I'm going to be a television producer or a media executive of some. I'm smiling because I like to stop counting and the years that have gone by. But I can remember being in 5th grade and this new thing called a calculator came out, and it might have been 6th or 7th grade, but the algebra teacher sort of calling me out for not paying attention in class, and I very smart aleck. He said, look, we've got calculators now. As long as I can balance my checkbook or whatever, I don't need to know what time trains pass each other. Remember that whole word problem thing? It used to be this train leaves at this time and this other
Oh
train leaves at
yeah.
this time, and what time do they pass, right? How is that relevant to anything? So she rolled her eyes at me, and
So even as a young kid, you knew you wanted to be in journalism, basically?
yes, I did. I mean, I was very blessed. My father then transitioned from the newspaper business to the television business, and so he was the community relations person. We moved to Washington, D.C., and that's pretty much where I grew up. So, we're talking about just a front row seat to everything historically happening as it relates to the civil rights movement and women's rights movement and Vietnam War and Watergate and all of that. And so he would take me to work, and I know that your focus is about just elevating the recognition that there are numerous prominent Black men that have made significant accomplishments. One that your audience should know, if they don't, is Max Robinson.
Okay.
So Max Robinson was the television news anchor at Channel 9 in Washington, D.C., where I interned when I was 16 years old in high school. And Max went on to become the first network news anchor, African American network news anchor in the history of television, which, you know, television doesn't have the same significance and meaning as it did before. It's all YouTube and, TikTok and all that stuff now, but this was
Right.
a big, big, big deal. And he, if you Google him or you look at some of the YouTube videos, the 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 sense of distinction, how do I want to put it? The level of confidence and the way in which he presented the news was just amazing. So
Mm. Now, that would have been around what year?
that would have been around 76.
Okay. And what was the name again? Max what?
Max Robinson. Look up Max Robinson.
Making a little note here. I want to do a
Yeah.
little do a little digging later.
Yeah. Yeah. Go to YouTube and look up Max Robinson. Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, I want you to imagine that you're going to be trapped on an island for 30 days. And so
Yeah.
for those 30 days, you can only take one book with you. What book would you take?
Hmm. I would take a book called Mastery by Robert Greene. I like Robert Greene's books. He's written about power and all kinds of other topics, but I often assign that particular book to my students. It's not just a like a typical self-help book. It makes you actually think about mentorship in a way that maybe we haven't thought about it since the classical times. When Michelangelo and Da Vinci and all these other people were doing great works, they always had apprentices who were at their side who were learning, how they did what they did. And a lot of those great works we can't even replicate now because we've lost, we've turned schooling into factories, in a sense. And that's a whole nother conversation. But just that notion of passing on skills and knowledge to the next generation is such an important piece. And so that's really kind of what the book is about.
Interesting. Now, I'm going to assume you enjoy movies. So name
Yes.
one of your favorite ones.
Oh boy. Beauty Shop, Queen
Okay.
Latifah.
Okay.
I know every line in Beauty Shop. I don't know why I think that movie is so funny, but I love that movie. I also am a huge Bruce Lee fan, and so Enter the Dragon, and is one of my favorite films as well. But Beauty Shop, I love Beauty Shop. It just
It's a
makes
great
whenever
movie,
that's
actually.
my comfort movie. Whenever I want to just like laugh, I
Yeah.
put that on.
Nice. Now, I wrote a book titled The Cure for Onlyness, A Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose. And in the book, I talk about the unique challenges that we as Black men have to deal with when we're the only person of color in certain rooms. And I'm certain you've had that experience. So how do you navigate those types of experiences?
Well, I would say that I was really, again, blessed to have a father who was a role model in that area. He was often the first and only black person in a position of leadership, and so I had him as a role model. It's funny. My dad had me do a resume when I was 12. And the reason he had me do that is because when he was out on the job market, like right out of college, he went in for a job interview and they asked him for a resume and he didn't know what it was.
Wow.
And he said to himself in that moment, no child of mine will ever have that happen to them.
Yeah.
So he used to jokingly say, we were programmed. I mean, we really, there was never, we were, it was really instilled in us that you can do anything. And I think this is another piece that goes back to the Tulsa history too. I mean, what a lot of people don't know is that Tulsa, like Texas and Oklahoma, like Texas, had a lot of oil money from a long time back, and African Americans were hired as caretakers, and there really was trickle down economics in the sense that it led to what we now call Black Wall Street, this section of Tulsa where people had thriving businesses, and so when some of the young people who were deciding to become educators, they would go out and they couldn't get jobs in white universities, and so they come back and they teach at the high school, and so they were teaching college level courses to high school students. And I didn't learn all this until much later, but it's why just the history of Tulsa is so important, in our all collective history.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, last question. As a man who happens to be Black, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in general?
I'm optimistic, and I'll tell you why. If you haven't already, find a way to get and tour the Smithsonian African American History Museum. For those who don't know, you start in the lower level basement where you see relics and just pieces of artifacts that relate to the slave trade and everything else. And then you work your way up. And by the time you get up to the top of that and you see the musicians, the athletes, the business people who have created a legacy in this country, coming from the harshest of historical backgrounds, it is empowering. It makes you realize, whoa, wait a minute. You know, people who survive that passage, and I've been to Ghana, several times actually, and I've walked through those slave castles, and you can feel and sense just I don't even know how to describe it. It's just just the what took place there, right? And then to
Mhm.
realize that if you're here, you're a descendant of someone who made it through that Atlantic Passage, and that in and of itself is empowering.
Mm. Now, the museum itself, which I have not visited, as you were talking, I just kind of had this vision. So you're starting off on the bottom of
Right,
the museum. So I'm just imagining being in the bottom of a slave ship, and then you just,
right. That's what
oh,
you feel like you're in. Yes,
yeah, and you're just kind of climbing that ladder, if you will, from Black people and the success that we've experienced and all the
exactly,
adversities we went through, and then we get to the
exactly.
top. So that's kind of how I envisioned it as you were talking.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very
interesting.
powerful.
Yeah, definitely on my bucket list to go visit for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have something in common. which is we both participated in a personal development program called LifeSpring. And I got to tell you, very few brothers I've talked to even know what LifeSpring is or personal development programs or whatever. So I'm just curious, how were you introduced to LifeSpring and what impact did it have on your life?
You got another hour?
The
Actually, I never did LifeSpring per se. I did the Landmark Forum,
landmark
which
forum.
which
Okay.
prior for that was the S training. But the founders of the Landmark Forum and LifeSpring worked together back in the early ages of that work, which we call the human potential movement, if you will.
Yes.
And I really could talk about it for 2 more hours, because I'm going to try to be succinct here. I think that that what you get from that work is a fundamental shift in realizing that once you take ownership of your destiny, right? We're not all dealt the same deck of cards. I was very fortunate to have a stable family, upper middle class, and be able to go to the college I wanted, although my parents didn't make enough to be able to pay fully for what I wanted to do, and that's a whole nother story. But my point is that I had a very stable, very good upbringing, and everyone doesn't necessarily have those cards in their deck, right? But what you start to see is that you don't have to be hooked or hitched to the past or whatever that history was. That it allows you to break free and to declare that you are going to be the author of your future, your destiny, right? And that does not discount the importance of a higher power, and however one chooses to look at that. That all sort of factors into it. But it's a different place to operate from that gives you power and gives you the ability to make things happen. And yeah, I mean, again, I could I could go
Yeah,
on and on.
and I was introduced to LifeSpring at a really tough time in my life. I'd gone through a divorce and bankruptcy and foreclosure. My life was a complete mess. And
Hmm.
I came across the LifeSpring trainings, went through their program, loved it, really changed my life. And then I got into Landmark. I've done all of the Landmark courses
Yeah.
and literally transformed who I am by participating in these programs.
Hmm.
And amazingly, when I went through, 90% of the time, I was the only Black person in the room.
Hmm.
And that never was an issue for me. But I remember thinking, where are the brothers at? I mean, because
Yeah.
surely, we've had stuff to deal with. And so it was just one of those things that literally changed my life. And if I were to sum up the one thing I learned from both of those courses is the power of commitment.
Yeah.
In those courses, I learned that if I'm truly committed to something, no one or no thing can keep me from accomplishing it except myself. That if
Right.
if, if I will just sum it all up, that's what I got out of it. If I'm
Yeah.
committed enough, I can do anything. So wonderful,
I would
wonderful.
say that it may sound to people listening sort of like hocus pocus, or yeah, sure, right. But let me just tell you, I mean, I had such a profound shift in my own trajectory from having done that work, that it led me to go on and earn a PhD. I mean, I wanted to understand what were the philosophical like underpinnings of that work, and I took a deep dive, and I can geek out for hours and hours. I mean, Dr. Ray Blanchard, who you and I both know and how we both met, was a LifeSpring trainer, and he and we just can go for hours talking about this stuff because it's so profound, it's so powerful. And it is a compass which helps direct everything I do, you know. And I would say, to answer your original question, and this aligns with biblical teachings too, is just the power of your word.
Yeah,
I tell my
absolutely.
students, say what you'll do and do what you say. That's the key to success. Say what you'll do and do what you say.
Yeah.
And that might seem simple, but if you spend some time just really dissecting what I just said and really get it, because what happens is people say stuff all the time, right?
Yeah.
And the world around them is looking to see, like, well, did that happen? Well, he said he was going to do XX. It did happen, but the world, and I would even say the universe, like it it um, it supports people who are consistent. Like if you are known as somebody who says you're going to do something, you deliver, you get more responsibility, you get more, you get a raise, you get, it seems so simple, but for many people they don't get it, so they show up late or they don't, they have excuses. They used to say a thing in Landmark, you either have excuses or results.
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
excuses are about why not and why you couldn't do X, right?
Yeah. And that's a really difficult conversation to have sometimes with Black folk. I remember when I went through the training and I was using their language and talking about some of
Mhm.
these things, it's like I was accused of denying that racism existed, or that these challenges existed, because I had this firm stance that I could do anything I set my mind to.
Right.
And I wanted to become a LifeSpring trainer. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
I didn't qualify to be a
Yeah.
trainer. So I decided, well, guess what? I'm going to figure out how to do my own trainings,
Hmm.
which is what I've done. And that's
Yeah.
another thing I learned in the trainings.
Right.
And so it inspired me to engage in this process called personal growth and transformation. And ever since then, and that's been 30 years ago, ever since then, I've used the things I've learned to accomplish most of the things that you see me accomplishing with the books and the writing and the movies and all of that. So very impactful. Now,
Yeah.
I want to talk about your career as a producer slash
Sure.
person. And you were a part of one of my favorite shows of all time, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
Lifestyles of the rich and famous with
Oh
Roman
my,
Leach.
my gosh. And when I used to
Romping
come
in Rio with Raquel Welch. Yeah.
It used to come on like 1 o'clock here in Texas. It was late.
Okay.
This is come on real late, but I would stay up and watch this show.
Right.
And I'm just curious, number one, how did you get associated with it? And then I got a couple of questions to ask you about the show itself.
Sure. Well, I have to tell you, I mean, again, and this goes back to just being the privilege of having a father who introduced me to media at a very early age. I mean, by the time I graduated high school, I had already interned at a TV station, and and I identified Emerson College, which is my alma mater, which was the school that continues to be one of the top media schools in the country, and people like Norman Lear and Jay Leno and lots of luminaries went there, and was more than what my parents could afford. But just to sidestep here for a minute, because it goes back to what you were talking about, commitment. I remember telling my parents, I'm going to go to that school if I have to mop the floors. And I don't even know what I was saying. Here I am, like, 19 years old or whatever, right? But what I did was I figured out how to become an RA so they didn't have to pay room and board. I figured out how to take community college classes for my gen ed requirements over the summer so that I didn't have to pay full freight at a private school for those courses. I figured out how to do Emerson in 3.5 years instead of 4 years. I figured out how to get scholarships, that paid for the year, a year and a half of it. So it was just this sort of sense of intention, and commitment that made that happen. And so how that leads to lifestyles is I had the other privilege of being a part of CNN when it launched. So I had interned for a woman in Boston while I was a student at Emerson, and she called me up one day and she said, "I'm working for this guy named Ted Turner. He's starting this new news network. Do you think you're ready to produce a show?"
Wow.
It was like, I took a breath and I go, "Jane, I think I am." She goes, "I think so too. I want you on a plane to Atlanta." And so that led to the first 3 years of CNN. And over that period of time, those first 3 years, John Lennon was assassinated, Natalie Wood drowned, and John Belushi overdosed. And it was but again, a front row seat to working in spaces where it's about as good as it gets, in terms of the caliber of people that you're working with. And so Robin Leach was a tabloid reporter, and he was wanting to do television, and we put him on our show at CNN. He was our New York person doing stories for CNN in the early days. And, in New York, our show was on at 1 a.m. in the morning, but it was 10 in Los Angeles. And when Robin got lifestyles, I just lobbied him. I said, Robin, you need me on this show, and it didn't happen immediately. But again, yeah, that's a whole nother story. It actually ties to my doing the S training that opportunity came about. But
So,
yes,
so
that's
what
how I
was the
grew
most
it.
powerful lesson you took from working on that show?
The most powerful lesson I took from working on that show is that the one hit wonders, the people, the celebrities who are here today and gone tomorrow, are the people who have the most obnoxious publicists, who are not generous or gracious. Whereas we had the people who had longevity in their careers were the ones who were trying to carry the crew's equipment, had food for us when we got there, and were just generous, like generous in ways that they didn't necessarily have to be. They didn't have an attitude, and that was something I always took away from that experience, was getting to meet those individuals. And I also learned that they put their shoes on just like you and me and tie their shoes just the way we do. They're not special.
Absolutely. Now, how did that experience shape your understanding of aspiration and the psychology of what people dream about?
Well, I'm a big dream. I'm a, I think really big. When I was when I was in high school interning at that TV station, and where I first met and to some degree got to know Max Robinson, but I was working on a local morning show. It was the beginning of what we call the human potential movement. It was the books like Wayne Dyer's, and Your Erroneous Zones, and all kinds of books like that. And so we were doing this local talk show, and these books would come through, and I was reading them. I was just like, read more, 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 and that kind of gave me a foundation that made the landmark work, and even sort of fortified that and gave some sense to it. And so I want to make sure I'm answering your question, and just specifically say again what you
Yeah, no, again, I think you answered the question because it's just about how did that experience shape your understanding, of the psychology of what people dream about, you know?
Yeah, I remember doing a story, and people won't know who Engelbert Humperdinck is. I don't even know if he's still alive, but
Oh
he.
yeah, I love Engelbert Humperdinck.
Okay, well, Engelbert Humperdinck lived in this house that was a quarter of a mile long, or something like that, in Vegas. And he had in his home in Beverly Hills the piano that Gershwin composed Rhapsody in Blue on, right?
Oh, wow.
And in his house in Las Vegas, he has this old beat up couch preserved in a room. And it's the couch that he would sleep on at night when he was still trying to make it and nobody knew who he was.
Oh, wow.
And to me, that story is a metaphor
Yeah.
for what I learned from working on that show. That the people who are often the most revered, what people don't see is all the hard work, and all the time and energy and all the doors that were slammed in their faces. And people who don't lose sight of that story of origin are the ones that most made an impression on me.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if that show were produced today, in the age of social media, wealth and influencer culture, how would it look and do you think it could work today?
Well, I think the reason Lifestyles worked when it did was this was the Reagan era 1980s. So shows like Dallas and Dynasty were on, and Lifestyles in a sense was the reality. It was one of the first what we might call reality shows. It was a show about real people, and it was the first show to show Americans castles and like opulence in Europe and all these kinds of things. But the underlying thing I think that really made the show work was stories like the one I just told you about Engelbert Humperdinck. That it was the the fact that underneath all this opulence, what was really more interesting was the fact that these are people who had worked their way up from, in many cases, nothing, you know. Um, and so, in terms of how it might work today, we're so surrounded by so many things, but I still think that people are looking to be inspired. I think there are a number of podcasts. There's a guy, young, he's half British and half Nigerian, named Stephen Bartlett, and he has a podcast called Diary of a CEO, and it's like one of the top 5 podcasts um, on YouTube and on Spotify. And he's black, right? And he's got, I think Kamala did an interview with him. I mean, he's had some amazing people on his podcast, and he is yet he's doing lifestyles in a sense for today's audience, and in terms of talking to people who can be inspiring, and who are willing to share and dissect, how they've gotten to where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know, they had what was the show? I think it was called Cribs, where they would do
Yeah,
and take it to
yeah.
these athletes' homes and
Mhm.
showcase, but it didn't, there was something about the lifestyle that I don't know if it was Robin Leach or what, but it just had a unique feel to it that it wasn't just about making money, but it was about authentic wealth, right? And I think
Yeah,
you
well, I think that what many people um, fail to realize is that, material wealth, um, it's like getting toys at Christmas. Like you wanted this thing, you had to have it. I remember going to sleep at night with a catalog. People who know a catalog, Ward catalog open to, I wanted a mini bike, or I wanted all these. You wanted this thing, and then you got it, and you played with it for like 2 days, right? And then you put it down. And if you really think about it, the car you always wanted, and you finally got it, and you're so excited, and you drive it around for a week, and then all of a sudden it's just a car. And I think the message there that unfortunately is not put forward in a lot of the music that our kids listen to, and is that um, it's not about materialism. It's not, that's not where the goodies are. In life, it's not about materialism. It's not about how big your house is. And we've seen it time after time of the rapper who was extremely successful, and all of a sudden picked up all the bills for his or her entourage, and had 2 or 3 houses, and then 6 months later broke. So
yeah.
yeah.
Now, so let's talk a little bit about that and, just media bias and representation in general. So, the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads,
Yeah,
how that sort of reflects media's negativity bias.
right.
So I'm curious, why does mainstream news lean so heavily towards negative storytelling?
Well, that's the history of American media, and I'm not excusing it. I think it's one of the reasons journalism. You look at statistics about whether or not people trust journalists. One of my dogs wants to come in. Come on in. Why trust in mainstream media is so low, is because of that. I think that one of the things that's interesting is if you travel internationally, and you see CNN International, the world sees a whole nother perspective. Or you look at BBC, or you look at, however, for whatever reason, executives have decided that we're more interested in Kim Kardashian or whomever the flavor is of the month than we are about what's going on, in other parts of the world. So we are fed the sort of lowest common denominator of information. But this goes back to Hearst and Pulitzer, and all the original media folks, who were trying to sell newspapers, with just sensational headlines. It's part of our culture.
Yeah. So do you think media reflects reality or does it shape it?
I think it does both.
Okay.
I think it does both, and it's hard to kind of figure out where that line. I think it moves. I mean, now the new factor that is AI, and that could be a whole nother two episodes here of
Yeah,
your show,
for sure.
and what that will mean. But yes, I think it does both.
So, from your perspective, so how does negative news contribute to harmful stereotypes about Black men?
Um, well, here's where our shared you know landmark and LifeSpring experience. You always got to be surrounded by all kinds of impressions, some positive, some negative, maybe even a lot negative. But I think that when you look at it from a certain perspective, you can filter out the noise from what is going to help propel you forward in terms of what you're trying to do. So it's easy to get seduced by the noise and the negative representations and to start believing that you can't do something or that the odds are stacked against you or whatever else. And, you know, I don't want to sound elitist or anything like that, but there's a way to, I mean, you look at Nelson Mandela, or there's so many examples of individuals, Tina Turner. I mean, so many examples of people who've been through horrific circumstances and lived to tell a better story later. And it wasn't because they all of a sudden got a huge paycheck or something else. They had to find something within themselves, and they had to filter out the negative noise externally in order to chart a course forward.
Yeah, yeah. And so, as a first-time filmmaker myself, I've sort of always focused on what's working versus what's not working. And so rather than point fingers and place blame on society and racism, I said, I'm going to create a movement specifically for Black men to
Mhm.
showcase Black men. So I'm curious, in your opinion, how important is it for us to have? I love what Tyler Perry said when he said, "Stop fighting for room at the table, build your own table."
Yep,
So how important is it for us to build our own tables to share positive stories, in your
it's
opinion?
extremely important. It may be the most important piece, and especially the element about story. It's interesting. In the last 3 or 4 years, almost every marketing company and campaign or whatever is talking about the importance of story. Like, got to have your elevator pitch. And you've got to have your just you've got to be able to capture and succinctly express what it is your value proposition, and all those kinds of
Right.
things. But story is at the heart or the essence of it all. So absolutely is important.
So why do you think films like Shatter the Stereotypes are critical for this moment in history?
I think that we all um, benefit when we see others who look like us and who share our background and our cultural lineage, um, just espousing positivity, like the more that you can get, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, as an educator,
Yeah.
how do you teach students to become conscious storytellers rather than what we'll call click-driven content creators?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. So we just did a shift in our curriculum about a year ago at University of Oregon. And so I teach a class called How Stories Work. And what we do is we take a topic out of the 10-week course. 8 of those weeks we take topics and we dissect them. And so, for example, we're looking at ethics and AI as our next topic. But we start with like softball topics. Like the first topic was veganism versus carnivores, like meat eaters, right? And to look at how does the meat industry message its appeal to people who eat meat to keep them eating meat, and what is the Beyond Burger, and how's the guy dressed, and what's the music, and how's the editing, and to really understand not just the surface story that you see when you see a commercial, but like what is it? What's the underlying technique that makes it effective, right? So that's how we do it, by teaching media literacy, but really more engaging students with really looking beyond just the piece of media itself. Who's funding it? How is it framed? How is it told? What's the lighting? What's the person look like? Is they are they a Portland hipster, or are they whatever? Why are these choices being made in storytelling?
Now, again, as an educator, when you're working with these young journalists
Mhm.
in your courses or whatever, do you ever have a conversation that helps them maybe uncover and confront maybe their unconscious biases as they're putting together stories?
Yes. I, you know, I'm not, I would not describe myself, even though when I worked for CNN, I was part of the entertainment news side of it. So I would not describe myself as a hard news journalist. That being said, I certainly understand and operate within the basic understanding of making sure things are accurate and well sourced, and all of that. Um, I tend to look at it from a bit of a different perspective. I think it's important for any type of storyteller, whether it be journalistic or another genre, to really first spend some time getting to know themselves, getting to know their own values, getting to know what they consider is integrity and what's out of integrity, for them. I think that the media professions, even though, almost anybody could start a news channel tomorrow on YouTube, at the end of the day, it's still a very competitive and sought after field to be successful at it, right? And I think, unfortunately, what sometimes young people do is they try to figure out how to contort and make themselves what they think is going to be appealing to an employer. And what I always tell students is, don't do that. That you want to find the right place to work that is aligned with your own values. First, find out what you stand for. And then when you have an interview, it's a two-way interview. It's not a one-way interview. And, we think like in scarce terms that there's only so much, only so much pie, right? We
Yeah.
got to get our piece, right? But if you go to work somewhere where your sense of integrity isn't aligned with the company's, it's not going to work out very well. You're going to be miserable, and it's not going to last. I think it's first defining and really taking a close look at your own personal story and what are your ethics,
Now,
and then letting that be your compass.
yeah, and so with that being said, do you help students maybe connect their craft to a deeper mission or purpose?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I have an assignment that's due this week. So we have this poster assignment, and what students have to do is they create a poster, and it has to be analog, meaning they can't just go onto Canva and take some images and stick them on a thing and turn it in. They actually have to use scissors and glue sticks and everything else. And they take this poster and they make 4 quadrants of the poster, and one quadrant is friends, another one is family, another one is community, and the 4th quadrant is yourself. And you put a picture of yourself in the middle of the poster. And then you go out and you interview people in your community. So you interview your parents and you ask, who were your heroes? Were you in the superheroes? Were you in what TV did you watch? Or you interview your family, your friends, and you may find that they just really love, I don't know, housewives in New Jersey or whatever it is, right? And then what you do is you take a percentage and you put it in each quadrant, all equaling 100%. Which of these quadrants influence who you are as a person in the middle of that poster? So is it 20% family, or is it 50% or 60% family? And how much of you would you consider to be original? And it's an eye opener for students, because they start to see that all this talk about empty slates. No, we are definitely we're definitely a product of the sort of the environments that we navigate in, or as Landmark would say, the conversations
Yeah.
that we come through.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a landmark exercise.
It's not. It's not. But it could be.
Yeah, it sounds like something you do at Landmark. So now you've trained journalists for years, so I'm curious, what separates great storytellers from average ones?
People who genuinely care
Mm,
about life and about people. So again, one of the reasons that journalism is kind of plagued right now is because the profession allowed itself to have what I call like the farm system, where person wants to work in the industry, and they figure, okay, they're going to go to a small market and work their way up, and so they're not really present in the small TV market. They're just there, like kind of to get their step up to the next place. So they're not really invested, and the people in the community can tell that, right? So to answer your question, what separates folks that are really great storytellers is that they're invested in the people and places where they're doing their reporting, and
mm.
it's authentic, and the community people that they engage with can sense that. They're not just short timers. They're there because they care, you know.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Now, I want you to imagine now you've got this young black guy, he's watching this interview and
Mhm.
he's thinking, man, I really want to get into journalism, but I don't know, you know, do I want to be on television or do I want to write stories or whatever? So for that guy who's kind of maybe on the fence, but he just knows in his heart he wants to be in journalism somehow, what advice are you going to give him to start thinking about maybe help him separate which direction he might go?
Well, it's the same advice I give students who are often, first year students, and they're still trying to figure out what direction they're going to go with it. Each of us has a device in their pocket, for the most part, that shoots 4K video
Which is amazing.
that, that you can also edit on, that you can upload to YouTube, and that people in halfway around the world can see what you do. So there is no barrier. Used to be, you wanted to be in television, cameras cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? But you can go out to the corner now and report on what's going on, in your community. And I don't mean that facetiously. I mean, I think that there's opportunities for people to try stuff. Sometimes people think, oh, I really want to be a video editor, and then they realize, well, maybe I don't want to be in a dark room, like 20 hour or so many hours a week. I really want to be out with people. So I think there's nothing stopping someone from trying stuff and finding mentors, sharing their work with people who can kind of point them in the right direction and say maybe more of this or less of that. And we're at a stage right now where there are a lot of publications that are looking for material, looking for content. So there's nothing to stop anyone from jumping in. And I think that, again, it may sound a little Pollyanna to say this, but I think that if you're mission driven and you believe that um, and you're passionate about something, that you're passionate about it for a reason. It could be your calling, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the primary reasons I'm so optimistic. Number one, I love technology. I love playing with technology. I'm blown away by the fact that I can do this interview with you and literally showcase it around the world for $14 a month. I mean, that just kind of blows me away.
Right.
And so, with that being said, we've got all this technology. And again, I'm a huge fan of AI, what it's
Mhm.
doing. And again, the optimist in me sees a lot more positive things about AI versus, the negative stuff people are
Me too.
saying.
Me too.
But from your perspective, in terms of when you're teaching, how important or do you dive into technology as a tool for your journalists to get their stories out? Do y'all have
Oh
parts of
yeah.
your courses? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I co-lead a media innovation lab that was inspired. Folks may or may not know, but MIT has a world famous media lab, and they do partnerships with big companies, IBM and 3M and companies like that. And I had a chance to visit that program several years ago and started to realize, with all the disruptions taking place in mainstream media, that U of O should have a lab to have our students roll up their sleeves and try stuff. So I oversee with a colleague, Chris Adams, whose career is just amazing. um, Chris ran Participant Media, so Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore, and movies like The Help and Good Night and Good Luck and Syriana. Chris ran that studio, and we're lucky to have him here in Eugene. He knows everybody. He worked for Facebook. He's the person who put video on Facebook. He's an amazing, amazing guy. So he's a collaborator with me, and we have students. We're able to have them take deep dives into technology. We had students last spring and winter develop an AI tool that would help kids with their class registration and planning their trajectory to finish school on time. And and they just they created it. So yes, we firmly introduce and encourage our students to embrace technology.
Nice. Now, when your students look back in 10, 15 years from now, what do you hope they say they learned from you?
Well, it's funny. There's a word back there from the Black Alumni Association, and one of the students who has graduated, who actually sort of helped present the award to me, basically said that I'm the person who told her about the three conversations, which it didn't come from Landmark, but it came from a coach that I had. I've worked with, professional coaches through the years. And when I say coaching, I don't mean athletic coaching. I'm talking about coaches, people who help you see your blind spots. It's a guy named Paul Roth who used to be in Los Angeles, and I've worked on and off with Paul for, I don't know, 25 years, as a coach, because he can help me see things that I don't see for myself. And Paul introduced me to this concept about three conversations. There's the conversation you have with yourself, which is the one that says, what is he talking about? Right? Internal dialogue. There's the conversation you have with other people, where you tell people what you're up to. What are you doing in life, right? And people don't realize, like I said earlier, people just say stuff, but they don't realize other people are taking notes, right?
Right.
And then the third conversation is the one people have about you when you're not in the room.
Mm.
And A lot of people will say, well, I don't have any control over what people say about me, but do you? Are you cultivating your reputation? How many opportunities may you not have even been introduced to because you weren't managing the conversation about your reputation?
That's
So
important.
that's so
That's
that's what students often come back and tell me that they most remember.
nice. So, how can people learn about other things that you're doing, Mr. Madison? I know you're a professor. I'm sure you've got other things you dive into. What's the
Yeah, yeah, no. So I also I run a nonprofit called the Journalistic Learning Initiative. I'm very proud that we're in 18 states with our work. One of our projects that we've had for the last 5 years is called Black Student Magazine, which we do in partnership with the National Urban League. And so it reaches kids all over the country. We have put a pause on that for now, just because of the current uh, just challenges related to anything that looks like DEI is not attracting the same kind of funding that it did um, around the time of George Floyd's tragic death. Um, but you can look up journalisticlearning.org. I have my own website, edmadison.com, or you can find me through the University of Oregon. So this, if you put my name in, stuff will come up into Google.
gotcha?
I
So,
also write articles on the platform called Medium, and we're doing like 4 new posts a week now. And on Mondays and Wednesdays, we talk about the future of work as it relates to AI. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we talk about the future of education. And so there's a ton of stuff there.
nice. And on Medium, it's under your name to find you?
Yes.
Okay.
Or journalistic learning, either or. And I've also published 4 books. Um, yeah.
Tell us real quickly what you published.
Well, so the first one was called Newsworthy, and it's about teaching language arts through a journalistic lens, and it was published through Teachers College Press at Columbia University. The second one was Reimagining Journalism in a Post-Truth World, and it's a little bit more sort of academic, but our current president is on the cover of it, and it was we put that book out right before his first term, and it's looking at misinformation and all of that. The third book is called Language Arts in Action, and it's really written for teachers to help them learn how to take some of the work that we do in schools and bring that into their classrooms. And then the fourth book is it's about empowering students to be more curious and confident. And they're all on Amazon if you search with my name.
Now, are there also links on your website if people want to find them?
Yes, there are links to them on the website. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. So now I want to give you an opportunity for your closing thoughts. Whatever's on your mind and heart to share after this conversation, you have the stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that um, when the results came in for the last election, um, it was very easy to go into a place of despair. And I'm not, I look, I am progressive in my politics. I don't necessarily bring that into the classroom. It's not, we want to honor that people have all different kinds of perspectives, and I'm very serious about that. But I think it was really more about some of the things that we're seeing as it relates to African American community, and and just some of the real impact of what happens when SNAP subsidies are cut, or when health care goes up 40, 50, 60%, or just all kinds of issues that particularly impact communities of color. This is very is having a dad who just fought so long to help us make these gains. It can be very depressing if you allow it to be, right?
Yeah.
And then I just had a shift, like you have to do what you can do. There are things that you can do, and there's things that you can't do. And so what I can do is inspire young people to understand their values and their ethics and who they want to be in life, and just trust that that the Constitution and the framers, like, I mean, I don't think they saw any of this coming, but without getting political, I think that we've had trying times, just challenging times before, and I think things will sort themselves out.
Yeah. And again, one of the things I love about doing this podcast is just having conversations with brothers, right? That not only have accomplished things,
Mhm.
but again, provides Black men with an opportunity just to hear different points of view and just to know. On my website, I have a tagline that says, "I'm an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible." And
Mhm.
and I really believe that. And again, I don't deny all the challenges that are out there, but when I have conversations with men like yourself, it just fills me with optimism.
Mhm.
And collectively, as I think about, what we as a community, a group have done in this country, and actually, if you put it in context in a very short period of time, I'm inspired. Um,
Mhm.
I'm really inspired because I was born in the 60s. And so I remember when we didn't see Black people on TV. And
Mhm.
I remember whenever a Black person was on TV, it was a big event. People were calling each other on the phone, Sidney Poitier's on TV or whatever. And hey, there's a Black guy on TV. Um, but again, I just choose, and that's the key word, I choose to be optimistic.
Mhm.
And I'm reminded of the quote that says, all the water in the ocean can't sink a ship unless it gets inside the ship.
Mhm.
So too with negativity. All the negativity in our media can't sink you unless you allow it to get inside of you. And
Right.
the way you keep it from getting inside of you is number one, don't watch so much of it
Right. Right.
because it will sink you.
Yeah.
But in summary, I just want to say thanks, man, for spending an hour with us, sharing your story, sharing your insights, because it's men like you who inspire me to do this work, to do
Oh,
this
thank
show,
you so much.
to showcase. Yes, there are lots of Black male role models, and again, that's the whole intention of the show. So again,
Well,
thank you
thank you.
for spending an hour with us. So this has been
Right.
another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes, and I want to leave that quote with you today. All the water in the ocean can't sink a ship unless it gets inside of the ship. So don't let the negativity sink you. We'll see you next episode. Take care.